I'm the music god, CJ Plain. This is the Noize Report. You know what we do here. We laugh, we have fun, we interview cool and interesting people, or pretty much anyone I can con into coming on this mess that I call a podcast. But today, this is next level for me. You guys on the show have heard me talk about this guy repeatedly, endlessly, right up there along with Devin Townsend and Freddie Mercury and Prince and all of these people that are on my wall behind me. This guy takes like multiple cards to list everything he's done. And we're going to get into all of it. But if you don't know this gentleman, I don't know where you've been or what you've been listening to, because it's kind of hard to miss him. This is Mr. Jeff Scott Soto, the man, the legend, the guy who could sing a phone book and make it sound like a Grammy record. How are you today?
I'm good, and CJ, it's good to know that the check cleared and you got all the notes for the introduction of exactly what I wanted you to say when I was coming on. So
this is literally the first interview that I've ever taken notes for. Normally, I'm just like
off the cuff.
Yeah, but I'm so erratic that I'm like, you know what? I'm writing this down because I have points that I want to ask about, and if I don't write them down, I'll talk about something else and then be pissed at myself later.
Which could be more interesting when you think about it. Just ramble on about the grocery list.
Yeah, so I guess for those that have been living under a rock, introduce yourself and I guess give a short background on yourself and some of the completely awesome things that you have done.
Well, my name is Jeff Scott Soto. I spent about the last 40 years in prison for no. I'm actually serious about that. I'm going on my 40th anniversary next year of being in this business, starting with Yngwie Malmsteen in 1984. And yeah, it's been quite a ride when you think in most cases, most artists, they're lucky to get 5 or 10 years out of a career. Mm-hmm. And I never look at what I have as a career. I always look at it as a work in progress because, I can rattle off all the people I've worked with and all the albums I've done, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, I'm far from a household name. I'm far from people around the world knowing me, like a lot of your posters on the wall, and to the levels of walking down the street and being recognized. But that being said, I've had quite the charmed career in terms of I've been able to kind of navigate and do things how I saw them, how I wanted to see them, as opposed to there were so many instances in the especially in the 80s where the labels or management would just pigeonhole you. They would put you in a place. You got to do this. You got to just stay in your own lane. And I was never one of those. And I really attest that ideal to being such a huge fan of Queen. Queen were one of those bands. They were the jack of all trades and the master of all trades. They're the kind of band that could just do everything and anything, and you believed it. You didn't think, oh, they're stepping out of their comfort zone. Their comfort zone was extending as much as they could from all the colors of the rainbow musically, and that's exactly what the course that I took as an artist. I always wanted to be known as more than just a metal screamer, a metal singer. I don't want to be known as a pop guy or a R&B classical. I want to be known as all of the above. So that's always been my course since day one, and I'm still on it, man. And as I said, at this age, I probably won't ever be a household name, but I'm enjoying the ride, and I'm grateful for people that like yourself that listen to the music and understand where I'm going with it.
I think you summed it all up. Like, for me, as a music fan, as a musician, as a songwriter, all of the things that I've done, there are certain people that I put on a pedestal above the others. Not because I think they're better or anything else, but they've done something to me that sets them there.
Right.
Freddie Mercury and Queen, Prince, Rick Rubin, you, and you just summed it up. You've made music that was outside of the box.
I've certainly tried.
You've never settled to be one thing.
Yeah.
When the labels told Rick Rubin, "Oh, the Beastie Boys will never work. You can't do that."
Right.
They told him, "You can't have Johnny Cash record a metal song. You can't have Run DMC record with Aerosmith. That will never will never work." Queen, their whole career has completely defied labels, record labels,
walls and borders. Yeah. And that's, you got to do what makes you tick. And that's the bottom line. You got to follow your heart. You got to follow your influences. You got to follow the course. And it's what we're going to talk about on this record today. This Slam album. Everything we're talking about is alluding to how and why this thing was made. And, again, going back almost 40 years ago, I started my career as a singer for Yngwie Malmsteen. Somebody in the metal category was, he was at the top of his game. And for me to want to take a left turn and go back to my original influence, I grew up with Motown. I grew up with Earth, Wind and Fire, a lot of pop music, a lot of R&B, soul music. And I honestly didn't get into hard rock and metal until I was 15 or 16. So I was only a couple years into the resource of what metal gave to me and what it brought to me. And so it was still kind of new. I was still kind of harvesting what my personal intake and what my contribution was going to be in hard rock and metal. But after a few years, I missed where I came from. I missed using those old influences and those old inspirations. And I started saying, when George Bernhardt, the guitar player from Slam, we're talking about the Slam record now, came to me with some songs. His band, Bo Nasty, just broken up. And he came to me with all these songs and said, "Hey, I got these things. I think you'd be great on them. I love to see what we could do together." There was no real intent in making a new band or project. It was more, he was a friend. He wanted to see what it would sound like if we did something together. And that's the result of Slam. It eventually turned into a band. We had 3 incarnations of the band until the demise in 1993. And what this album is full of is all the demos that we put together that, we started this whole Slam thing when the entire industry musically was changing as far as the rock side of things. And anybody and everybody knows from the 80s into the grunge scene, the labels basically were not interested in you if you weren't from Seattle or wearing flannel. And it's the old but the bottom line is that was one of the biggest, I guess, roadblocks for us, that nobody wanted to take the gamble or risk on something like this, because we really tapped into what a lot of the bands that were doing this kind of stuff were also tapping to, from Extreme to Living Color to Dan Reed Network. There's so many I can name that were within the category, and it's just they were not ready so much for the mix of soul and funk mixed with rock, as much as the majority of what was going on. So that's one of the reasons why it never took off. But we stuck to our guns, and we just kept building the perfect beast of what we wanted this band to represent. And not being signed, we just, here we are in 2023. 20th Century Music reached out to us, and they said, through the decades, people have copies of these songs on cassette tape, demos that you must have sent out. And there's 4th, 5th generation with a lot of hiss. And what do you guys say we do a nice, clean, mastered copy of this and get it out to them the way that it was intended to be heard?
Yeah, there are, there's a few that are kind of legendary, because the early stuff from Brunette before Johnny and Joey did Hardline, those still float around, and you could still get 13th and 18th generation those things. And I've often wondered, at what point are they going to take those songs and do something with, because Joey and Johnny are both so brilliantly talented.
Johnny's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, I got a list at the end. We're gonna
Right on.
We're gonna do a short little game that I created for
All
this.
right.
But what we're here today, Slam, 1991 to 1993 is when this thing was recorded. 16 tracks. It's an hour and 11 minutes, full of really pretty much, I'd say almost a kind of a retrospective of what you've done even afterwards. Like, a lot of your records have kind of followed in stylistically. Like, there's a lot of songs that recorded that.
And there are songs from this that were actually done and used for other purposes. And again, because when I knew there was a demise of the band in 93, that didn't stop me from feeling that the songs needed to be heard or it should be heard. So I used a few on my solo records. There were 2 songs that my other band Talisman re-recorded and kind of made retooled for Talisman. And yeah, these songs to me, they meant something. They were so important to me that I didn't want them just to fall on the wayside. I wanted them to be heard. And now, of course, you'll be able to A/B both versions of where they came from and what some of the fans or some of the people that have my stuff might have heard on the redos on them. So let me back up a little bit. When we first started shopping for a deal, we could not get any interest, except for there was one label that offered us a demo deal. Now, a demo deal is basically they'll give you X amount of dollars. You go into a studio, you turn in the tape. It's kind of like shooting a pilot for a TV series. They give you the money. If they like it, they have the first right of refusal to sign you. Unfortunately, they didn't sign us. And when we got the money, we didn't go spend it in a studio for 2 or 3 songs. We invested it into recording gear, the home recording gear. And that's where all these songs are recorded. It was George Bernhard that mixed and mastered and did all of that stuff. Nice. Besides recording everything. But backing up again, the source that we use for all of these things, and when you listen back, you won't believe the quality that came from such a small machine. It was the old Tascam Porta Studio, the 8-track, where your masters were a little cassette tape. And if anybody knows anything about recording and technology and everything, the bandwidth of a small little tape like that carrying so many tracks compared to the 2-inch tape that carried all that information, you're talking about a massive quality loss. But we found a way, or George found a way, to really emphasize on the quality without it suffering. And that's why we were able to get away with these songs sounding so good, even in the demo form.
It's crazy where technology has gone from, the analog of the 70s.
Yeah.
And the reel to reel.
Yeah.
To where now you literally can turn a room into a home studio,
hundreds and hundreds of tracks. And it harkens back to what Queen had to deal with, the lack of technology, the lack of tools, and it didn't stop them. Again, this is so inspirational for future artists to watch and to know of a band that was able, or even a producer, they were able to utilize to the death of what they had available to them. And really, the results were just astonishing when you realize how many overdubs and how many stacks and mixing down and bouncing tracks that you have to do to create that monstrosity without having the tools that we have today and the technology is today. It truly is staggering how they were able to pull that off. And I love, that's why I really respect and I'm proud of what we achieved here with these songs, because the amount of work that came in making these songs, it's not even close to what we could churn out 4 albums in that time with today's technology.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy to think that there's literally, Grammy winning records now that are being recorded. Billie Eilish, for example, recorded it in her bedroom. And I have a friend who's a country singer, and he sent me his record, and it was so good. I mean, it's up there with George Jones and those guys. And I was like, what studio did you record it in? And he's like, oh, I recorded it in my daughter's bedroom. We just,
that's awesome.
We put a bunk bed, in the living room for her, and we just took her room over for 2 months. And I'm like, there's no way you recorded this.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, every one of my vocals since I want to go back to man, it's going way back, maybe 91, 92. Every single vocal you hear on releases that I'm on as a lead vocalist was done right here, with my microphone. It just
Right.
whatever I had at the time. Of course, it's changed and have upgraded and updated since, but
Right.
everything was done on my own without an actual studio. And I too learned how to be a little more self-contained and not
Right.
have to worry about, okay, I got to book the studio, I got to drive there, I got to get there, you got to watch traffic, I got to make sure that the engineer knows what I need and how to do it. Okay, I want to punch in this line and go back. No, wrong one. Let's go. I
Right.
learned all of that stuff to avoid all that waste of time. And people always ask, how do you have all these releases? How do you do so much work? Because if I do it on my own, I can do it at my pace. And when you've got it down to a science of what works for you, I could record 3 albums a day at this point, just based on I'm doing it in my pace and my own speed, and I don't have to rely on anybody else to achieve it all.
Yeah, I'm 52 years. I'll 53 in April, and I'm going to school now to study sound engineering and audio production. And most of my friends are like, "Why'd you wait till you were 53?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've done music my entire life since I was 15 years old. I've either been in a band or I've promoted shows, or I've done festivals or just something. And I've just never gone in that direction. And then I got into internet radio and podcasting, and it's been this super expensive hobby for me.
Yeah.
Like a decade. And I finally just thought, you know what? Maybe I should do something to actually get paid for this shit. Cause
right.
Like
better late than never,
Yeah,
better late than never, and no regrets. It's all part for the course. Right. No matter when you do it or how you do it, it's just all about doing it.
Yeah. So this record, you guys are going to have vinyl later this summer for it, right?
Correct.
And is there a particular site where we can buy this vinyl? Because I need a copy.
Well, I'm sure wherever you buy music these days, the majority of people going to Amazon, they'll be able to find it there. I'm sure you can find it on 20th Century Music's website. I'll always offer links and ways to purchase or to find certain things on my social media. So as long as you do a little digging, unless it's right in front of you, we're not going to send mailers out every week. It shows up to remind you. But if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it's so easy. Just look it up and Google it, and you'll be able to find it within pretty easily.
Nice. So I have a few random things. Biker Mice from our soundtrack. How did that happen? And I guess share some stories from that, because I love that damn thing. And I know it's not one of the more widely released things, right, all of that, but it was one of the cartoons that I really loved. And for the longest time, I didn't even realize it was you.
I get that a lot.
Yeah. And then when I found out,
funny thing is, I'll tell you a funny story before I tap onto that. There are times I'll be doing stuff with younger musicians if I'm doing appearances, as I recently did in Bulgaria, and the band they were my hired backup band. Well, they weren't really hired backup band for me. They were just the hired musicians for an event that I was part of, in terms of I was one of the singers of many singers, and we're just hanging out. Of course, they know of me through a few little circles here and there, but for the most part, if they're half my age, they're even younger than my own son, they probably don't really know what I've achieved, what I'm all about, what I've done. And I think it was the bass player. I'm pretty sure it was the bass player. At one point, he came up to me and goes, "I just found out that you're the singer on Biker Mice from Mars. Is this real? Is this true?" And I go, "Yeah." I'm like, "Biker Mice, really? You're asking me about this more so than asking me about Yngwie or Journey or Trans-Siberian Orchestra or Sons of Apollo?" And he goes, "You have, oh my God, I'm actually meeting my hero right now." I was his vocal hero because of that cartoon. And to be honest with you, that was one of the first times my son was very young when that came out. That was the very first time that he actually realized what I did for a living. He actually was, "Oh my God, my dad sings Biker Mice." Right. Again, forget about all the other achievements and playing in front of big stages and everything. But for a kid, especially my own son, to look at me like, "Oh my God, my dad sings for Biker Mice from Mars," it was kind of a cool thing. I got that as just a general session. I was supposed to do like 1 or 2 songs on it. And as we're recording, I literally remember the phone ringing with the producer. Basically, all the others that were supposed to be singing on the record were pulling out for scheduling conflicts, loss of interest, negotiation of what they were supposed to make fell through, whatever. So I'm literally at the session. He's hanging up the phone, going, "That's great, Jeff. We finished one. Can you do me a favor? This singer just dropped out of this. Would you be able to do one more?" I'm like, I listened to it. We would record it. I ended up doing the entire record. And I think there were names like Billy Idol and Vince Neil that they had as other singers for this soundtrack. It ended up I sang on the entire thing because people were dropping out for whatever reason, and I'm so proud of that because there's again, there's so many cool songs on there, especially that match with the story and match with the cartoon. It just was a blast to do. And I got a lot of free toys and figurines and video games of biker mice for my kids, so it was even better.
Nice. Yeah, it's just one of them things, like destiny, I guess you could almost say.
Yeah.
That. What else do I have here? The Queen concert that you did. Kind of how did explain how that kind of happened, and because that is to me, that's one of the defining moments for me in your career. Like that record, it has your own unique spin on all of those songs, but at the same time, you and Howie are so reverent to these songs themselves. Like you can watching the videos and listening to you sing those songs, you can tell how important they are to you, and
absolutely
that you're not just
it's not a cover gig for me. No.
Yeah,
and for me, when I'm singing Queen, or even when I'm singing covers, but especially with Queen, I don't try to reinvent it or try to make it my own. I really try to tap into keeping it real and keeping it I guess I don't want to change what's not broken. Right. And you can't change things on a Queen song because you're going to break it. You're going to turn it into something that is unfamiliar to most people's ears. So I try to stay as true to the originals when I do Queen songs. I try to stay to, whether I'm trying to stay true to how Freddie did in the studio or the way he did it live. I'm always choosing different versions of those songs when I'm performing them live, because there were some songs we did that Queen never did live. So for that, I would just stick to the script and make sure I delivered them within the context of the original versions. But that whole thing came about, again, it's a really everything I have is a long story. I probably have like a 4-volume book if I ever did an autobiography, because there are too many details to leave out. But it started in I'm gonna say 97, I think it was, where I reached out with hopes of maybe doing something with Brian May if he needed a singer on his solo things, because Queen was, it was gone by then. They had no intention of bringing it back. And Brian was very nice. We exchanged a few letters back and forth, and it was in 99 that I was asked to sing with him at it was a show to celebrate Freddie Mercury's birthday for the fan club in England. And on my own dime, I flew out and I met Brian for the first time. I sang a couple songs with him and Spike Edney, the guys that always that Spike brings around. Spike is the keyboard player and musical director of Queen. And it was great to finally meet Brian and jam with him. From there, I kept in touch. And the president of the Queen fan club in 2001, they got the star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And I was invited to go sing with them there. It was here in Hollywood, so it was close to me finally. I didn't have to get on a flight for 11 hours. And it just extended my friendship with the guys. I finally got to meet Roger, and that's where that whole thing started. It was from that, the president of the Queen fan club in England, every year they do a Queen convention. She invited me to come and sing a few songs with a Queen tribute band that they had booked for that. And I was more than obliged, because anything that has to do with Queen, I'm in. You can count me in. Flew out to do that. And the fans loved it so much. And the fan club president loved it so much. They asked if I would come the following year and do my own band and do a headlining set of all Queen songs. Once again, You don't have to twist my arm. I'm down.
Right.
And one thing I noticed with these Queen tribute bands, they're pretty much just sticking to the Wembley show. When they play live, the singer's always wearing the yellow jacket, with the fake mustache, and they're doing basically a tribute to those songs that were on that live Wembley album. But I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go deep tracks with a Queen crowd, and all Queen convention crowd. These are the Queen, like Trekkies. There's like a Star Trek convention. They know every nuance. They know every B-side. They know every side project, every solo out. They know every detail. So I knew if I go deep with some of the songs that we're going to do, they were going to know them. They're going to sing to every song, and I was absolutely right. That's why we did things like Too Late. We did Dragon Attack. We did things that you normally wouldn't hear at most Queen shows or tours back in the day. And so that was it. It was recorded. I didn't know it was being recorded with the audio on the full-on Pro Tools system. I didn't know we had so many. I knew we had cameras. I didn't know they were actually filming and keeping. So from that, we just rounded everything up, and we made our own version of That Night.
Nice. There is one Queen song I've never heard it covered, and it's my favorite Queen song. And I think in today's society, with everything going on, it's even more relevant now. And I would love to hear somebody cover the song "Don't Try Suicide."
Oh yeah,
because one, everybody talks under pressure. They talk, we will rock you, we are the champions, and all that. But that bass line for "Don't Try Suicide,"
boom, 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 boom. Ding.
It's the coolest bass line that I think Queen ever did. And, and you gotta love a song, where somebody says, "All you do is get on my tits," and it's just
I remember when I first heard that, and I thought, why is a guy talking about his tits? It sounds so strange, and like, what? And you had to wonder what does that even mean?
Right.
And it wasn't until my regular visits to England, that's just a term they use there.
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting on my tits, you're getting on my nerves, basically, is what it means. But we didn't know that in the early 80s when that album, well, it was 1980 when that album came out. Like, what the hell did he just say?
First time I ever went to Australia. I've been to Australia one time. I flew to Australia to see Kevin Bloody Wilson in concert because Kevin never tours anywhere other than Britain and Australia. And I was like, I'm going to see this guy before I die. And I went over there and I went to a pub before the show. And the bartender was like, "Would you like a glass of piss?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "You don't drink?" And I was like, "Yeah, but not piss." He goes, "You don't like beer?" "Oh, beer? Yeah, I'll take a beer, but..." He goes, "Oh, I forgot. You Yankees, piss is a different thing." And I was like, yeah, like I'm not drinking piss unless I'm like lost in the desert and dying or something,
And it's another expression they use where you're taking the piss.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I'm not taking a piss. I'm just standing here with my pants on. It's like, no, taking the piss means you're making fun of me.
But anywho, I would love to hear someone do "Don't Try Suicide." It's such a great song to me, and I really think with everything going on in schools today and the bullying aspect and whatnot, it just, I think the message is even more relevant now.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll find a way or a reason to do a cover of that song, because I know every lyric, every nuance of it. It's actually singing in my head right now as we're talking.
Right. It's one of them songs like people talk about Queen, you never hear them mention that song.
Well, yeah, like the one I mentioned earlier that we did at the Queen. I think I call it "Too Late." It's called "It's Late." It's one of my favorite songs from the News of the World album, and I think they might have done it live, but I never heard at that point. Never heard them do it live. I'm like, I want to do the song, and not just a medley, not just a snippet. I want to do the entire song, and we pulled it off. The poor guys in my band, Howie, Gary, and Alex, I put them through the ringer. When I sent them all the songs they had to learn for this show, they're like, "Oh my God, you better be paying us like 3 gigs worth of salary for this, because it's a lot of work."
Gary is someone I admire. Gary so much because he is such a phenomenal musician.
Absolutely,
so many levels. And again, another person that you never hear in the conversation that really should be in the conversation.
I couldn't agree more. I really wish he had a little more legs under him, as you know, with people knowing who he is, and that stinks.
I want to discuss this really quickly. You've been doing a thing on your Facebook, the soup to nuts thing.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by it because there are a couple of them that I never really listened to before. I knew of them, but I guess I just never really listened to them. And there's a few of them that are my personal top 10 records, such as Queen 2.
Yeah.
The one that stuck out to me, though, and I know you're friends with them, the Saigon Kick record. Saigon Kick is one of those bands, again, that the first time I heard them, I admired them for the same reason as Queen and a lot of the other people I named, because they really they covered so much territory on those records and did it in a way that wasn't going to make them superstars, but they were just so true to their sound and style. And Jason is, again, another phenomenal musician who you just never hear people talk about him enough. And you know, to kind of discuss the list a little bit.
Jason and Gary Shutt are very similar, but in extremely different ways. Gary Shutt went to Berkeley School of Music, College of Music, and Jason Bieler he doesn't know a minor Phrygian, the difference between that and a major seventh. He doesn't know theory, doesn't know the terms. Right. Everything Jason does is pretty much off feel, and there were a few things I even called him out on a few times where he's singing a major over minor, or minor over major, and he goes, I don't even know what that is. I do music, and I do what I do because it feels good and sounds good in my ears. I don't think about it. It's theoretically wrong. I'm using the wrong phrasing, and that's what the brilliance that comes out of him in those terms. It was kind of like the Beatles. They were learning chords, but they didn't go to school to learn them. They didn't go to lessons where they were, okay, this is a Phrygian, this is a pentatonic. They didn't learn any of that stuff. It kind of all fell on their laps, and they just kept expanding on it as they were experimenting on their own. And that's what Jason does. Somebody like Gary, he knows every nuance of every note, everything he's doing is based on the knowledge of how building a musical tree works. And that's, I praise Bieler all the time for the fact that he's able to do and pull all of that off without any of the knowledge that you would think it's all premeditated. It's like you knew if that you were doing something that was going to spin around and turn around musically and turn into that. And he goes, I have no clue. It's all these notes and ideas in my head that just come out, and that's what you get in the end result. And I praise him for it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So tell me if this is true. I don't know if this is true or not. I think I read somewhere Ronnie James Dio was kind of the same way, right? Like he couldn't read music or any of that.
I don't really know of his background. I would imagine he could read music because, like myself, Ronnie started as a trumpet player when he was younger. I was a trumpet. Okay. I was always a singer, but before I was actually in bands as a singer,
right,
I was a trumpet player. I started learning the trumpet in the 7th grade, I think, and I played all the way through high school. So playing the trumpet, you have to learn to read music. You have to know what the notes and crescendos and ritardandos and all the different things that come with that kind of music. You have to be able to read. You have to understand the note selections. So I'm assuming Ronnie, I didn't know how far he got with his trumpet playing, but I'm assuming he had to have had some kind of knowledge of how it all works and how it all fits together.
Okay. I just read somewhere, and you know, you read stuff and
sure,
you never know if it's true or not. And I didn't know that Ronnie was a trumpet player. I knew he started kind of doo-wop-ish type of
right.
You know, evolved out now. Yeah. So the last thing I kind of want to get into, I call it blurts.
Okay.
I have a list of names, and I'm going to say the name, and you just kind of blurt out the first thing that comes to mind.
Got it. Go. Let's do it.
Howie Simon,
the King Genius, And I say that because he's self-proclaimed himself as the king genius. And every time he sends me an email or something that comes up with his little moniker, it's just, oh, there's Howie again.
Nice. Mark Martel.
Brilliant singer, absolutely brilliant singer. And it's weird when you have a natural voice, when you naturally sound so close to somebody like Freddie, who's impossible to sound like. It's impossible to emulate. It's impossible to step into Freddie's shoes. And Mark didn't. He never went down that lane. He always did his own music. It was just something that was it's a crazy coincidence. And it's crazy because even when we did the Queen Extravaganza, there were a lot of songs he never heard. But when he learned them, it's like, oh my God, it sounds like you've been studying this. He could do tomorrow. He could do "Don't Try Suicide." It would sound just like Freddie because he just has that natural nuance on how to tap into Freddie without even trying.
And not just sing like Freddie. He looks like Freddie. Like in so many, like not an identical twin, but
yeah. And that to me comes from when you're doing a tribute or paying homage to a particular artist, the person just naturally starts looking like that. I remember this singer Hugo that was in a band called Valentine, very reminiscent of Steve Perry, and he's been doing the Journey tribute for so many years. Yeah. He looks like Steve Perry when he's singing those songs because it's almost like your image morphs into the person that you're paying tribute to.
A gentleman who I have become a massive fan of since he started, and another one who just I'm blown away by, Dino Jalusic.
Yeah. It's been difficult to just come with a single word to describe him because, again, he's one of those other. He's not just a singer. He's an amazing producer, an amazing songwriter, amazing musician. It's almost like he was born from not from parents. He was born from a music book. He was born of the knowledge and the natural gift that comes from being able to do everything and anything. And he's such an incredible talent. He's a dear friend, and I champion him. It's weird because in normal circumstances, if I didn't know him, you normally would think, oh, this kid has everything. He has everything I always wanted. He's doing everything I always wish I was able to do at that age. And you'd be kind of jealous or envious. And it's the absolute obvious, the absolute opposite. With him, I'm like, dude, you are so good. Just keep killing it, keep doing it. I give him the advice, watch your back, just make sure you're always protecting yourself because you're so good. Everybody's going to be clamoring and clawing to try and get their mitts on you. So just watch your back and just keep doing what you're doing because it's working.
Yeah, I love that Animal Drive record so much, and then to see his evolution kind of coming up, of doing the TSO stuff and doing his solo stuff, and then the videos y'all kind of did during quarantine with Joel and those guys, the Jane cover and
right.
The Boston cover that they did was that's like one of my all-time favorite records, and that was such a fucking crazy cover with that group of because it was him and Joel and Mike and anyways.
Dino is he's a total musicologist, and what another thing that we have in absolute common is our love for variety, for different genres. You should hear them. He sings the hell out of Stevie Wonder and other formats that are not metal, that are not hard rock.
Yeah.
And again, this comes from that world of bring it all in, bring in all the tools and all the tricks and trades that you can make yourself be a little more unique than the next person.
Next name on the list, Alessandro Del Vecchio or Del Vecchio.
Del Vecchio, yeah.
Del Vecchio.
Beautifully talented individual.
Yeah.
And beautifully talented, but also beautifully gifted as a person. He's one of those, he's the marriage of the perfect person in terms of somebody you want to hang out with, somebody you want to be around, but also somebody you want to work with all the time. And that's I can't say enough nice things about Alessandro. He gets a bit of a raw deal because he does a lot. He does a lot for a lot of people, and people say that he's starting to it just sounds like everybody's doing the same. It's not cookie cutter as far as I'm concerned. When he writes for other people, he writes for their strengths and the things that make them tick as artists.
Yeah.
He doesn't write for solo albums that he says, okay, take this song, make it work for yourself. I don't see that at all with him.
Yeah, like he's always struck me as so down to earth, so real, so humble. Like,
this game's not working for me. I'm giving way more information, way more answers than just blurts.
Next name on the list, Eric Martinson.
Jesus, again, another guy just so brilliantly talented, and as a songwriter, as a producer, and now again as like the other people I keep bringing up when they're behind the scenes, an engineer, a mixing engineer, a mastering engineer. He's doing it all. He's grown so much since the first time I saw him playing as a singer for a Europe tribute band many moons ago in Sweden. And they got a funny story I'll throw in since we're talking about Eric. His name is Eric Martinson. We already have for many decades a singer named Eric Martin, and everybody knows, and everybody's always seen Eric Martin as ageless and timeless. You see Eric, you go, God, has he aged at all in 40 years? He looks like he's maybe 10 years older in the past 40 years, and he's always got that forever youthful appearance. And Eric Martinson was the same. He was maybe in his late 20s, but he looked like it was 12 when I met him. And so I was introduced to him by Marcel Jacob, my former Talisman buddy, and I maybe his English or the interpretation didn't come across the right way. I said, "Oh, Eric Martinson, man, you have Eric Martin's disease." And it was one of those, okay. I just met one of my musical heroes, Jeff Scott Soto, and he said, I have a disease. He didn't understand what I meant by it. It's like, you look like you're a kid and you'll forever look young. And even today, you look at him, he hasn't aged, and he's probably in his 40s by now, but he looks great and he sounds great. And going back to how we started, he's grown so much as a writer, singer, band leader, all of the above. He just does everything. Producer, he does everything.
I tease Mitch Malloy about that very thing, because Mitch,
absolutely,
from the moment that Jerry introduced Mitch in Metal Edge to now, looks like he's aged about.
Yeah, Mitch Malloy has Mitch Malloy's disease.
He looks like he's aged about 9 days. And when I interviewed him, I asked him, I was like, "So, you built your house on the Fountain of Youth, right?" Because he goes, "What?" And I was like, "Dude, you haven't aged at all." Like,
and his voice hasn't either. His voice hasn't.
It's like
sounds the same. I sang background on the very first is when he first got the major deal with RCA, and I sang on backgrounds on that album, and his voice sounds the same now as it sounded then. It's insane.
Yeah. The last name on the list, and I saved him till last because I actually share a birthday with this gentleman, Mr. Mike Portnoy, and I ask about him mainly because my best friend is the biggest Dream Theater fan in the world, and we just went last week to see Dream Theater and Devin and them guys, and Planky kind of talked the whole time about, Dream Theater with Mike and Dream Theater with Mike, and I was like, well, it's still Dream Theater with Mike, it's just a different Mike. We also, Planky and I were in Battle Creek the last time you guys played at the music factory.
Cool.
And I was standing by the curtain, because every time you would kind of go sit down during the solos, I was trying to get your attention, because I've been trying to get an interview with you literally for like 10 years. And, through this, that, or the other thing, it's just worked out. And I was literally like this.
Oh, geez.
I wasn't trying to be rude about it, because we're doing a show and all of that. And, but it was such an amazing show.
Thank you.
It was the first time I'd ever actually gotten to see you perform live. So it was even cooler that, it was Billy and you and Ron and everybody. And you had one of my favorite guitar players, Tony, opening, which is more insane. So anyways, your thoughts on Mr. Portnoy?
Well, initially, I mean, the first blurt that I would think is the first word that comes to mind is legend. And Mike reinvented the approach to, especially to prog music, but more so to hard rock drumming.
Mhm.
He's unabashedly always a hardcore fan of the people that he loved growing up, and he's always giving them props. And there's so many musicians you wouldn't think would be his musical heroes or inspirations, but when you corral them all together, it starts making sense of how he was able to reinvent the approach to playing drums, especially the hard rock music or to prog music. And that band was one of those bands. You know, Rush had their thing and how they did it. Dream Theater took it to a different level, to a different stage. They were able to, where Rush, the heaviest things that Rush would do became some of the lightest things that Dream Theater would do. And so they took a format and a genre, and they really opened it up, and they were so influential. So Mike was a legend for so many years, way before I even got to even dream of working with him.
Right.
And for him to invite me into this band, it was Mike that pulled me into Sons of Apollo. There was no audition. There was no, Mike knows what he wants. When he's played with everybody and anybody. He knows
Right.
everybody in the business. And so for him to see me singing every night, opening up for the Winery Dogs in 2016 in South America, he already had it in the back of his mind. I need Jeff for this new thing that we're going to be going for. And that in itself, I have no words for the respect, for the attention and the validation I got from Mike, that you're the guy. You don't have to audition. We don't have to see if there's chemistry. That none of that. You're the guy for this. And look how it turned out. His visions were it was spot on. His visions are there for the artwork. It's for so many different things that makes that band tick. And I'm just flabbergasted that they would ask me to be a part of that. And I did everything and anything that I could to prove myself that he made the right decision to have me in there.
Yeah, because some of those songs they're very technical. They're very kind of on a different level than what you're normally singing. And I'm not saying, I don't say that to be mean or rude, but it's like, when you transition from being kind of a straight rock singer or a straight funk singer into some of the stuff that Billy and Ron and Mike can do on the prog side of it, the difficulty scale kind of goes up exponentially with having to match that level with the time changes.
Let me give you a little food for thought on that and exactly what you're saying there. If you think about it, and if you listen to pretty much 95% of the songs that I'm singing on Sons of Apollo, you'll hear that I'm not singing over any strange time signatures or when I'm singing, it's the straight part of the song. It's the meat and potatoes of the song is there when I'm singing. It's when I'm not singing, that's when all the kitchen sink stuff gets thrown in. That's when they go crazy musically and technically, because they want the song to be focused on when the singing's going on. That's the core of the song. You need to harvest that and hone that in and remember it. So that was intentional, that we're just going to keep it straight. We're going to keep it to a point where the average listener, you can grab them and hold on to them. Now, if you grab them and hold on them when the singing's there and the other stuff starts coming in, that's the next step. That's the next trick. And they're going, oh my God, I never expected it to turn into this and go into that arena. So that's what the beautiful thing about Sons of Apollo is. It differs from Dream Theater in that sense, where Dream Theater would always use a lot of technical time signatures, even during the vocals. With Sons of Apollo, they don't keep it straight because I can't do that stuff. I can't follow the chorus of different times.
I'm not saying that at all. Because
I'm just letting you know, and letting anybody listening or watching this know that it's mainly just to make sure that the core of the songs when I'm singing are the memorable parts of the song, and then let those guys fly and do their thing on the other parts of the song. And it's a great blend of the two worlds as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So to wrap all this up, where do they find you social media wise? Where do they kind of keep abreast, for lack of a better word, of what you have going on tour wise, music wise, all of the different things because you're like the hardest working man in music, man. Like
Well,
you
I always tell people,
835 records, you know.
I always share my when I share my socials, I always was able to say, if you follow me on, or if you find me on the socials, if it's got a blue check mark, then you know it's me. Unfortunately, I can't say that about Twitter anymore because I'm
Right.
not going to pay for a check
Right.
mark. I mean, it's not that important to me. It's important for people to know that it's really me, and that's what those check marks represent. But if somebody can just buy one and say it's me, it's really no reason, or I'm not. There's no point. I proved myself of who I was, and had enough of a following to earn that blue check mark. I should have been able to keep it. So
Right.
you look for me on the socials, you see a blue check mark, that's me. And everything I do is on it's literally as it's happening. When I get something and I need to promote it, it goes on there before it ends up on any websites or any other sites that share that information. So if you need to find out what I'm doing, where I'm going to be, what's going on in the near future, my socials are the best place to find all that information. It's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter still, but Twitter I don't have the blue check mark, but it's you can tell it's me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. We're gonna wrap it up. This is Mr. Jeff Scott Soto, formerly of Malmsteen, Eyes, Talisman, Takara, Humanimal, Boogie Nights, Wet, Sons of Apollo, TSO, Soto, and a whole laundry list of other amazing projects that you've been working on. I just kind of just wrote a few down off the top of my head.
Right on.
But I'm so honored to have you here. The Slam
Pleasure's
record absolutely rocks. It sucks that it took 30 years for it to see the light of day. Definitely check this thing out. It's self-titled Slam. It has a very cool graphic on the front, kind of a heart with some steampunk other stuff going on. So cool concept, all of that. Who are the other? I guess kind of touch on real quick the other three guys in the band, because I guess
the core of the band, it was George Bernhardt and I. We started it, and he did all the drum programming. Again, we're going back to those old formats of recording. We didn't have the luxury of studios and live drums and mics and doing it the way you want to do it when you have a big budget. Right. So he programmed all the drums. I did whatever little keys were necessary. I did all the vocals. So it was a two-man operation for the most part. George played bass on the earlier stuff. The first incarnation of Slam was two guys from Connecticut, Craig Polifka and Chris McCarville. Chris McCarville played bass, and he's gone on to play with House of Lords, Dokken, and so many other things on his own. And they were the first incarnation with a drummer named Mark Bistany. And when that didn't work out, we replaced we got the bass player his name was Ricky Walking. He was in the third phase, the second and third phase of the band, and Gary Shutt was in the second one. Gary was in it for a shorter time because we were working on songs, and again, it was one of those things that didn't really gel. He could play funky stuff, he could think funky, but it wasn't coming from an organic place. Right. And everything that George was coming up with, he wanted to make sure we kind of clicked on the same within the same platform. Mm-hmm. And so Gary was only there for a few months, and then we decided we're not going to get a second guitar player. We kept it as a 4-piece band. So the core band, as far as I'm concerned, the real version of Slam were the four of us: me, George Bernhardt, Ricky Walking, and Mark Bistany.
Awesome. Mr. Jeff Scott Soto, as always, you know how we end here. Be well, treat each other with kindness. Remember that no matter how bad your life is or what you're going through, music heals.
Right on. Thanks, CJ.